the link for this meeting and all the slides will be shared out afterwards as well. So keep that in mind. All right, so welcome. Thank you so much for coming and getting more information on what our math club will look like at Community House this year. So a couple things. Let's talk about what this means. So the club is open to any rising 6th and 7th graders who will take math at Community House Middle School. So for you, all of your 6th graders are welcome to take the club. This helps provide exposure for higher level math concepts. The club is completely free. It is not a guaranteed placement for Math 1. So just because your child attends the club does not mean they will automatically get into Math 1. Students are going to take the placement test at the end of the club. So sometime middle of May or beginning somewhere in the month of May, we're going to be taking this Math 1 placement test to see what math is appropriate for them next year. Note that our honors courses are one level up and are open access. So if you're a 6th grader going into 7th grade, if you don't get into Math 1, you could just get into Math 7 honors. This does not determine placement for Math 7 honors. Another thing that I know some of my parents are going to ask right now is if my student's already in Math 7 honors in the 6th grade, do they still take the Math 1 placement test? And that answer is yes. Any student in 6th grade who's not already in Math 1 and is in an honors course will be taking the Math 1 placement test. We want to do this so that way we can get data on our students and make sure we're providing the appropriate math course for them. If for whatever reason, after a whole year of 7th grade honors, if your student is still not ready to take Math 1, then yes, they would be repeating Math 7 honors. We haven't had that really be a scenario yet. So again, we hope to continue that trend, but just understand that we need to place your children in the appropriate math class for them. So the goal of the club is to expose your students to a rigorous curriculum, right? We want to provide accelerated math course to students aligned with their needs. So this could mean high school credit, meaning you're taking Math 1 in 7th grade and Math 2 in 8th grade. We want to make sure we're giving your student the proper math placement. And we don't want them being placed on just what they see in the classroom, but if they want to accelerate further, we want to provide that opportunity. That's what the entire purpose of the math club is for. So why the club? Capacity versus what students have had exposure to. So if your student doesn't know, like, here are the kind of topics that you need to do to be able to accelerate yourself further and excel in Math 1 as a 7th grader, we want to give them exposure to that, right? If they're not able to figure out what that would be without being in the club, then they're obviously not going to be able to get into Math 1 as a 7th grader. We also want to give equal opportunity, right? We all know that we want to create as much of an equitable environment as we can. And so that means we want to give everyone the opportunity to get this exposure to the material. We also want to let students take the math that is academically appropriate for them. So if they're able to take Math 1 in 7th grade, we want them to be able to take that. So for you all, rising 7th graders, what that means is that your students would take Math 1 next year. It's very similar to the high school Algebra 1 course or literally just the Math 1 course. But if, again, like myself, even in school, I took it as Algebra 1. It's named Math 1 here in North Carolina. This is more important for, we'll just talk about Math 1. So what Math 1 looks like, you don't have to worry about if we have more than 25 students, we will have more than 25 students. But I want to highlight what happens in terms of the fact that this is a high school course. The final grade goes on transcripts, but is not part of their GPA. So what will end up happening is parents sometimes wonder, like, oh, if my student gets, either a low A or a B, is that going to affect their GPA going into high school? No, the final letter grade is only what goes on the transcript. So it'll say Math 1 and then the letter grade. There is an end of course test that makes up 20% of their final grade. And every other quarter also counts for 20% of their grade. And once they're on the Math 1 path, it's very difficult to get off. So some parents ask, what does this mean? Is your student going to be like expected to cram all of this math in 1 year? No, that's not how it works at Community House, right? We realign our curriculum so that way, if you are, let's say, in 7th grade, you're going to be learning 7th grade topics that are missed in the curriculum, as well as Math 1, right? So what that looks like for math for 7th graders is the following. So in 6th grade, your student is either in Math 6 honors or Math 7 honors. In 7th grade, you're going to be taking Math 1. And the 7th grade concepts that aren't covered through Math 1 is geometry and statistics. So those are specific concepts that the 7th grade Math 1 teacher will be teaching during that year. And then in 8th grade, they'll have Math 2, and there's also Math 8 geometry topics that are covered throughout the year. Okay. If my 6th grader is in honors Math 7, does he automatically go to Math 1? He still takes the placement test. Yes, any student who's in honors takes the placement test. Let's save questions to the end though, just to make sure we're all getting through the information. So how do you determine if your student is ready? There's kind of 2 questions you really want to consider with your child. Is your child academically ready, right? Are they ready to take on this challenge of accelerating an additional year? The other piece we want to think about is my student emotionally / maturity ready, right? If they aren't emotionally ready, this can really be harmful to your child because they aren't ready to take on that workload, that accelerated curriculum, and really it can really mess with their math efficacy, right? So they might start seeing themselves as bad math students when really they're just accelerated too quickly. So here's kind of how we can assess this, right? Is your student academically ready? Does your child consistently perform in the 90th percentile on MAP or EOGs? Every child should be getting MAP reports, as well as you can see what percentile they were on their EOGs in previous years. Does your child consistently make A's on math tests, right? So any of those perform or rehearse grades, are they getting consistently A's on those? Does your child enjoy math and strive to learn more? This is a huge piece, especially for my parents here. Does your child enjoy math? Do they want to accelerate, right? And does your child seem bored in math and complain that math is too easy, or just remark in general that math is too easy? If your answer is yes for 3 out of those 4, your child is probably academically ready to consider accelerated math placement. So this is just the academic side, not necessarily the emotional and maturity ready. So does your child consistently turn in assignments on time, right? Is your child someone who's going to struggle with turning in work or having homework on a nightly basis, right? Because once they're in Math 1 and Math 2, you really are having homework, at a minimum nightly. Does your child enjoy being challenged by a math class? The fact that this is an accelerated math course means that we're going to really cover one topic a day minimum, if not multiple standards being hit in a single day. Does your child have appropriate time management? Are they able to do homework and study and kind of figure out what they need to do on a weekly basis to set themselves up for success in this math class, right? If your child isn't able to allocate their time to academics and really have a plan of action when it comes to studying, this is something that might not be appropriate for them. Does your child know how to advocate for themselves? If they struggle, if they have questions, are they going to be the one who's going to step forward, come to tutoring, ask those kinds of questions in class? I know a lot of your students here today are going to be academically gifted in math. However, for some of your students, that also means they haven't really had to try in math before, right? They've kind of just posted through with their natural talent when it comes to math. And so what that means is they haven't learned how to actually advocate for themselves. They aren't aware of what it means to ask questions. So when they get to a point that they really have to struggle, do you know that your student is going to be someone who's going to ask those questions and really make sure that they're communicating with the teacher to make sure they understand. And number 5, here's the biggest one. Does your child want to try advanced math? The worst thing you can really have here is that your child is put into this advanced math course, based on the data, but they don't actually want to be in it, right? What that means is then when it comes crunch time or they're starting to really struggle, they start to really feel down upon themselves, and they almost kind of blame teachers, parents, whatever it may be, for even being in this place in the first place, because they didn't want to be in this advanced course. So if you answer yes for 3 out of 5, your child could be emotionally maturity ready for advanced math. Please be aware this decision is to be made by the family, right? We know your child through these data points and through the math club, and through whatever math course they're in. However, you know your child best, right? Just because your child is academically ready does not mean they are emotionally or maturity ready. Do they have that work ethic, right? Are they ready to handle this extra bit of challenge? I know this is a weird year, but in general, we've had a couple of students every year in Math 2 who might be academically ready, but the emotional level and that maturity piece really does not show through. And so what ends up happening is when they get to that level of such advanced math courses, they really start to struggle and kind of fall behind, and it starts to snowball, right? And then if you have a student who wasn't, ready for that kind of workload and ready for the pace and rigor of the course, they start to feel bad about themselves mathematically. And now we've turned a student who was very gifted at math in the first place, and now we're making them start to really doubt themselves and think they're quote unquote bad at math just because they weren't ready for a very accelerated pace. So I think this is the piece that is kind of not looked upon by families enough is your child ready to be challenged, right? Because the worst thing we want to do, and I'll say especially this year, we've had this issue, right? I teach Math 2 and Math 3 at Community House. So I've seen this with my Math 2 students, especially in 8th grade. If your student doesn't have that work ethic, that drive of wanting to do well in this course, wanting to be accelerated, what ends up happening is you've set your child up for a path where they're going to either 1, take more standard level courses in high school, or 2, we've accelerated them into Math 2, but they kind of limp their way through, and suddenly they're in Math 3 in high school, and maybe they get okay in Math 3, then they get to pre-calc, and then they start to really not do great. And now we have a student who's in 11th grade, not sure if they're going to take AP Calc or Stats, right? That's the last thing we want to do. We want your student to feel confident in their ability in math, to pursue STEM classes, right? And potentially a STEM education post-secondary. So we want to make sure that your student is ready to take on the workload of what it means to accelerate this extra bit. So if you're still here, let's review how Math Club works and how the accelerated math placement works. So there's going to be 9 to 10 weeks of meetings. For 6th grade, which is all of you, there's going to be meetings 7:45 to 8:30 on Zooms. This is going to be on Tuesday mornings. All lessons are already on YouTube from previous years, and they're also going to be recorded on a weekly basis. So the lessons that are recorded on YouTube, that's me running through the lesson and kind of doing it at a little bit quicker pace. That also isn't going to take into account anything that gets tweaked from year to year or week to week, right? So if I notice maybe we didn't quite get a topic as much as I'd like, maybe I'll review that again the next week in the warm-up. That's not going to be covered in the YouTube videos. But every lesson is also recorded, because I know, especially trying to do this in the morning over Zoom, we have students trying to leave to catch the bus. We have parents that have to leave to get into carpool. I understand we might not all be able to make that 7:45 to 8:30 window. So that's the window in time that I'm able to do it at. And we're doing it over Zoom just because, 1, every student has access to that, and 2, especially with protocols as they are, we want to try to restrict any type of student interaction in very large groups, which is what Math Club ends up being, right? We end up getting roughly 70 plus students. That's not something where we want to cram them into a library or even the cafeteria. Any previous lessons and videos, all of that is going to be on the Canvas course that your student will get enrolled in once you fill out that Google form. Topics range from solving equations with variables on both sides, graphing lines, double distribution. Some of you parents might know that as foiling, solving systems of equations with substitution, and some basic power rules. Here's a list of all the topics that we're going to be covering. The big piece here also is slope and comparing rates of change, slope-intercept form, comparing lines, all the stuff that I just talked about before. And again, remember these slides are in the chat. This is also going to be posted on Canvas. This is also posted on the CHMS math page, right? So you can get this list of topics anywhere on there. We do not expect your child to learn and understand the ins and outs of all of these topics, right? That is not going to be possible in 9 to 10 weeks. I'm not expecting your child to be able to gain and have mastery of everything monomial power rules or everything dealing with all forms of a line, right? But we're trying to figure out is how can we get your students to glean content quickly and pick up on new math concepts and be able to apply them, right? So we're going to cover all these topics in depth in Math 1 and in these accelerated courses. So just because your student isn't, 100% on substitution, that does not mean that, suddenly they shouldn't be in Math 1, right? That is a topic that's going to be covered again. I had a parent ask if we could see the topics covered list one more time. All right, so let's continue to move on. So here's the math path for your child, right? So if they are in Math 1 in 7th grade, that means 7th grade, they're going to be doing Math 1, 8th grade, Math 2, right? These are both high school courses. Math 3 in 9th grade, 10th grade pre-calc, 12th grade AP stats, and AP calc / AB BC. You can also switch these around the 11th and 12th grade, but again, that could work either way, right? I know a lot of students will do calc first and then finish with stats. So here's kind of the expectations. Students arrive on time and they leave on time, right? You're kind of showing up a little before that 7:45 and you're ready to go at 8:30. This isn't as big of an issue on Zoom, but making sure your student arrives on time because we're only going to spend a set amount of time on warm-ups and problems. So that way we can move along through the curriculum. Another big piece, asking questions to student and student helpers and paying attention during the club, right? Just because they're logged into Zoom doesn't mean that they are going to be doing everything that they need to be doing. I also myself have past students that are going to be logging into the Zoom to help as well. So that way they can ask, if I can't answer the question, one of the student helpers can ask. And it really gives your students some one-on-one attention, especially when you're dealing with students who are in Math 2 as 8th graders, right? So they can kind of see where they will be in a couple years. So what can/should you do with your child? Talk with your child about whether or not they're interested in taking accelerated math courses above honors level. That's a huge piece. Does your child want this? If you start the process, have frequent conversations with them about how they feel about the club. It's important that you gauge your child's emotional responses to this process. It's going to be a struggle, especially at the beginning, right? Learning this accelerated curriculum and how quickly we're going to go through it. This is something that you as a parent need to really try to support throughout the entire process. If it becomes overwhelming or upsetting to your child, remove them from the club and make sure they understand that this is extra and for fun, right? This is a challenge. This is not the expectation. You're seeing a lot of math they've never seen before, and that's challenging. Just because they can't get it this year doesn't mean they're bad at math. That just means they're not ready to move on that extra level. Help them do any of the extra homework problems. These are not going to be checked, right? The homework is not something I'm going to be graded. I can't be responsible for an extra 90 kids' homework. Encourage them to reach out and ask questions. My email is always open. I'm literally one of the first teachers as you walk into school, so they can always stop by and ask me questions as soon as they enter the building, or always send me an email whenever they'd like. Okay. The other piece is reassure them that this is for fun and determine the best placement for them. Hold on 1 second. All right. Test days, this is for rising sixth graders only. For seventh graders, you're going to take the test in early May. It's approximately 25 to 30 questions. They are able to use a calculator. And here is the interest form that we will put in the chat. All right. So, yeah, go for it.
I'll answer some of the questions I've seen in the chat, and you can start going through them and see. The one that I do want you to look at, Mr. Erb, is the time thing that's coming up. So Math 1 is a high school course. I saw a parent ask about what if my child doesn't do well. So we do have tighter timelines with Math 1 because it's a high school course. So for example, since it is a high school course, there's a 20-day drop period. So we will typically get at least one test in within that 20 days. So if your child does not do well within the first 20 days of school, then they will, then they have the opportunity to drop from the class. After the 20 days have passed, it is difficult to be dropped from the class. Not impossible, but difficult. And I do want to be clear that once they're on a Math 1 track, it's really hard to get off. Mr. Erb mentioned that, but I want you as parents to understand that. It's very difficult to fail Math 1. Just because the EOC is 20% of their grade, and because of how the grading system works, where students can't get lower than a 50 on their perform assessments. That's still the case for high school courses as well. It is really, really hard to fail Math 1, but it's not hard to get like a 60 or above, right? So it's hard to get below a 60 because of the grading policy and things like that. So because that is so difficult, once a child is taking Math 1 and we're past the 20-day mark, they are likely going to be in Math 1. They're likely going to pass Math 1, and they will take Math 2 the following year, regardless of how they do. Again, because it's not impossible to fail, but it's really hard. I don't believe we've ever had anyone fail the course, actually. So something for you all to think about there. There's still tutoring offered with Math 1. Those teachers still have flex time. We're still doing that. You still have tutoring. You have all the same supports that are available. It's also a year long instead of a semester long like it is in the high school. But we do the exact same curriculum that the high school does. So it is the CMS Math 1 curriculum. It's the exact same that they do. It's just over a year instead of over a semester.
Yeah, and I think the big piece, can we accommodate, or some of the questions I saw, can we accommodate a timing of 7:30 to 8:15 so that way the students can catch the morning bus? The problem is I'm also trying to get to school. I have to drop my daughter off at daycare. 7:45 to 8:30 is really what I can do. That last 15 minutes, again, everything's going to be recorded. So if your student isn't able to get those last 15 minutes, they are able to watch that last 15 online or watch it in the YouTube videos and so on and so forth. The question about CAV crew, it's not every Tuesday, but it's approximately 2 Tuesdays a month. For those, again, you can watch the recorded lesson if that's the case. Tuesdays is the day we're going to be able to do it on in regards to all the other clubs that I run. So we want to make sure that I can fit it in without moving everything else around. Other questions? I know some parents might have seen the test date dealing with the April 30th. That was specifically for rising fifth graders. Math 1, the Math 1 test is going to be taken in school. That is going to be something that they do toward near EOC time. Prince, you still have a question? Must be an old hand. Again, throw any questions you have in the chat as well. Will students need a graphing calculator? It's not required. A lot of everything we're going to be doing in the club can be done on a scientific calculator. I'm not going to really, I don't have time, unfortunately, to show the ins and outs of graphing calculators, but they will be shown in Math 1. How many questions out of 30 do we need to get right to be able to get into Math 1? Again, if you really want to, talking about getting into Math 1, it's not just the Math 1 placement test, it's also your Math 1 formal grades throughout the year. So those performs and rehearses, as well as your MAP data, as well as your EOGs, right? And the placement test. So all 4 of those things combine to really say, is Math 1 the appropriate placement for you? If you want a number, get at least a 25 out of 30. And then you're set. If they are in Math 1, will they automatically go to Math 2 next year? So assuming they pass Math 1, which as Ms. Weiss talked about, that is very hard to fail given the current grading system of the district, yes, they will automatically go. Will you share this PowerPoint? This PowerPoint is linked in the chat, as well as it will be put on the CHMS placement test or the CHMS math page as well. If he doesn't pass the Math 1 placement test, he will do 7th grade honors again. That is correct, Rafi. That is correct. Again, if your son is not ready to move into the next math course, that is exactly what would happen. But to me, that also brings up a conversation of why is your student not ready, right? I don't think that would be something we should really worry about. Will the answers to weekly homeworks be posted online? Yes, all answers will be online. Every homework will have answers with it. Will practice problems be given after each session? Yes, all of that will be found in the Canvas course. After the test, when will students come to know if they are in Math 1 or not? I would say probably end of May. Before the end of the school year, worst case scenario, but end of May. Do you recommend some books or ebooks that students taking up Math 1 test / during attending the math club? A lot of the resources we're going to have are kind of making makeshift, like a digital ebook that they could use in terms of videos, practice problems, and problems that we're going to use. If they follow the Canvas course, they should be fine. Do 6th grade honors teachers make recommendations? That is taken into account, but we really let the students' performance speak largely for them, right? Any other questions?
I'll speak to that a
Yeah,
little
go for
bit too. I mean, frankly, no. I mean, very rarely do the teacher recommendations really, no. What we've found is that teachers tend to say yes to compliant children and no to non-compliant children, regardless of what their data looks like. So we really focus on data. So we're looking at those test grades, the MAP scores, their EOG data, and their placement test. Those are the things that we're really focusing on, because just because a child is not compliant doesn't mean they can't do honors level work. So in general, teacher recommendations are not, they're not a top priority for us, and they're not part of what we consider typically.
Any other questions? Yeah, I think the big piece is, right, your students still have another MAP test coming up, right? They have a spring MAP test. That's a huge data point we use, as well as their, perform and rehearse grades throughout this entire year. But really this second semester, you can really start to kind of booster your, hey, I should be in Math 1, right? Okay, well, if we don't have any more questions, again, please fill out this Google form. The Google form is very important because that lets us enroll your student into the course, right? This lets us get their student ID, which then I can enroll them into the 6th grade honors course. Okay, again, if you have any questions, please let me know. This video was recorded and it will be put on YouTube, so that way you can share with any of your parent friends who are not able to come and any parents that weren't able to attend. Thank you very much and have a great night.
Thank you.